Hey, welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're jumping into a really big, and I mean big, question. What on earth comes after economic growth? We're going to look at two huge ideas, degrowth and the steady-state economy, and then explore a fascinating critique that kind of questions everything. Let's get into it.
So everything really boils down to this one simple but massive question. For, generations, our entire world has been built on this promise of endless economic expansion. But both of the ideas we're talking about today start by saying, hang on a second, infinite growth on a planet with finite stuff? That's just not going to work.
So what's the first answer on the table? Well, it's a movement called degrowth. And yeah, it's pretty much as radical as it sounds. It calls for a complete, fundamental rethink of how we live and how our societies are structured. Now, the key word here, and this is super important, is planned. This is not about, an economic crash or a painful recession. Not at all. Degrowth is about a deliberate, carefully managed scaling down of our production and consumption, especially in the wealthiest countries, with social justice and a healthy planet as the absolute core goals.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, how does this actually work? What does it look like? Well, degrowth is based on these 6 core actions. It starts deep down, at the level of our values, shifting from just buying stuff to caring about cooperation. From there, it moves outwards to restructuring our economies and focusing on local communities. And then you've got these huge, crucial steps: redistributing wealth, intentionally reducing what we consume through what's called voluntary simplicity, and of course, making everything we produce last as long as possible.
All right, let's pivot to our second big idea. Now, if degrowth is the process of shrinking, the steady-state economy is more like the destination. It's about finding a point of balance, of sustainable equilibrium, and staying there.
This whole idea was really championed by an economist named Herman Daly. The key concept is to maintain a stable or steady amount of both people and physical stuff. The best way to picture it is like a bathtub. The goal is to keep the water at the perfect level, not too high, not too low, but with the faucet turned way, way down. It's not about endlessly filling it up. It's about maintaining what you need with the absolute minimum flow of new resources.
So how do you achieve that balance? Daly laid out 3 incredibly bold and, let's be honest, pretty controversial pillars. First up, you directly tackle inequality by literally setting a floor and a ceiling on how much income and wealth someone can have. Second, you stabilize the population, which involves some really radical proposals. And third, you put a hard cap on resource use for the whole economy. This isn't something that just happens, it's a framework that requires serious political will.
Okay, so we've got degrowth, this idea of shrinking, and steady state, this idea of stabilizing. On the surface, they sound like they could be opposites, right? But here's where it gets really, really interesting. The relationship between them is actually the key to the whole thing. Turns out, they're built on the exact same foundation. Both degrowth and the steady-state economy look at our obsession with GDP and endless growth and say, nope, that's not a real measure of well-being, and it's definitely not sustainable. And this is the real aha moment for a lot of people. For many in this movement, they're not competing ideas at all. They're two sides of the same coin. Degrowth is the active journey that overconsuming rich countries have to take, and the destination of that journey is a just and sustainable steady-state economy.
And this isn't just some fringe theory, It's so official that the main organization pushing for a steady-state economy, a group called CAS, has actually adopted this as their official slogan. It paints a pretty clear picture of a unified vision, doesn't it?
Okay, but just when you think we've got it all figured out, the degrowth leads to a steady state, a much deeper, more philosophical question pops up. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't only about economics or resources. Maybe the real problem is us. This is the question that forces us to zoom all the way out. What if even these really clever, really thoughtful post-growth models are still missing a fundamental piece of the human puzzle?
So this critique argues that basically every major system we've ever created, from capitalism to socialism, has ultimately struggled because it can't solve one fundamental internal human tension. And the worry is that these new models might be destined to fail for the exact same reason.
And here it is. This is the tension. On one hand, you've got the common good. Think socialism, right? The focus is on the group, on society as a whole. But the risk? Sometimes that can kind of crush individual creativity and freedom. On the other hand, you have the human prospect, that drive for innovation, for progress, for individual achievement that capitalism really champions. But the price for that is often social justice and the well-being of the community.
So the big, kind of tough conclusion here is this. By focusing so much on ecological limits and economic mechanics, what if these new ideas, degrowth and steady state, are just falling into the same old trap? What if they don't actually offer a new way to solve this ancient balancing act between the individual and the collective? And this quote really nails it. The quality of life of individuals in a society is directly proportional to the justice of its social organization. In other words, you can't have a good life if you're living in an unjust society. It's not just about having enough stuff, it's a moral challenge. And that really is the question we're left with. It reframes the whole debate. Is the ultimate challenge just about managing our planet's resources better? Or is the real and much harder work developing our own moral competence to finally build a society that is truly just? One where both the common good and individual potential can flourish together. Something to think about.